Test. items?
I believe I do.
Okay,
Yes,
okay. Just so that we're all on the same page
right. And
here.
I believe, if I understand correctly, the first item is addressing the addition.
Yes.
Okay. And I have a larger version of that, but that's also in your book.
Okay.
I'm here to request permission to add a small addition to the back portion of 345 South Washington Street, which is also illustrated on this board here. That might be easier for you to read. Basically extending it out so it lines up with the back bedroom and goes across, which will allow more room for laundry, and it's going to line up on the back side. Not much. It's not going to change the line of the house. It'll just match up with the back bedroom area. So that's the first item. We're basically going to extend the roof out and lift up the angle. If you look at the side view of the illustration, you'll see how that's represented by the architect's rendering. And one thing I want to note, that rendering shows the roof is actually going to be metal. It's currently metal that's on there, so we're going to extend the metal portion out. And it shows shingled on the drawing, and that was just an incorrect representation there. And also, the other change to note, there are two windows that are not period windows. They're horizontal. What do they call this? 2 by 1/1s, I think is what they're called. Those are definitely not period. They were added sometime, I think, in the 70s maybe. I don't know. But we're going to go back with one large window that matches the style of the windows that are in the house currently. So that'll line up correctly.
Okay, Louise, you said that the roof was metal.
Yes.
Now?
Yes, if you look at one of the photographs, it's very hard to tell unless you go up above to see, but if you look, it's a corrugated metal that's on that flat portion now. Basically, we're going to lift it up and extend out a similar metal roof style, which is also, well, I don't know if it's the same style that's on the servants' quarters or not, but one of the pictures you can barely see the edge of it.
Ms. Langley, if I might, if you take a look at the little photograph
there you go.
that's on the last page in your packet, you can see very clearly that it's a shiny metal roof there between the two wings.
Thank you. That'll be helpful.
Okay, are there any questions at this moment for Louise regarding item number 1? No? Okay. Mr. Duke, just for the sake of organization and maintaining a train of thought, would you come up and give us your staff report on item number 1 only?
Just for clarification, in the staff report, item number 1 is really talking about restoration and repair of the residence, and as you well know, anything that doesn't alter the exterior appearance of the structure, we consider that to be maintenance. And if you've been by the site, you know that we released a building permit to cover anything that does not require a certificate of appropriateness. So that would be item number 1 in the staff report. The addition, or the roughly 45 square foot addition, would be item number 2 in the staff report. And certainly you're aware that additions have some fairly stringent requirements. One, that they be in the rear of the building, that they have limited visibility. They, of course, need to be compatible with the rhythm and the scale of the original building. They should, in most cases, be distinguishable from the historic building, and they should not try to imitate earlier architectural styles. Now, that being said, we're talking in this case about a very small addition, which could arguably be stated that is an addition to an addition. If you take a look at the building, that back area has been altered previously. And the addition that is planned is really just kind of an extension of that addition. It certainly is not visible from the street. Might be a little bit of visibility from First Street, but not from Washington. It is definitely compatible in scale and style with what's already there. And so I would consider it to be in keeping with your guidelines. It's difficult to meet all of these standards, and certainly something of this size. We're not talking about adding a brand new wing onto the building. We're talking about a small extension of a previous addition. So,
Okay, are there any questions for Mr. Duke? And yes, I do apologize. We did sort of lump those two together, but
it's quite
thank
all
you.
right. No, you're fine.
Okay, thank you. If there are no questions for Ms. Jennings nor Mr. Duke, is there a motion to be made regarding item 1 first?
Well, I move that we approve item 1 as presented.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Chair votes aye, and item number 1 is approved. Now, item number 2 has kind of been lumped together with that. Are there any questions regarding item number 2? Is there a motion to be made regarding item number 2?
I'll motion that we grant appropriateness for item number 2.
Second.
All in favor say aye. Chair votes aye, and item number 2 has been approved. Ms. Jennings, if you'll come up and we'll discuss 3.
What is 3 on your list?
Okay, 3 on our list is a fence.
Oh, okay. What was 2?
Was the addition,
Oh,
yes,
okay,
in between,
okay. I was like,
yeah.
Okay, I missed something. I was like,
1 was restoration and repair
Thank you.
of the
Okay.
servants' quarters, and then 2 was the addition. Yeah,
we'll get to that.
it was the restoration and the repair.
Yes. I
Of
see
the
what you're
maintenance
saying.
of that.
I got you. That's correct. I understand. The fence is basically an area, and along with the parking area, and I've done another little fun with it. Basically, I want to go back with an iron-type fence, which is also a rendering, an illustration has been done by Larry Smith, which kind of shows it's a double gate. Something similar to that style, in keeping with that. He has 60-inch high fence, a black iron to surround the property.
Okay, any questions?
I have a question. I see 3 different heights for this fence.
I know, I'm sorry. And that was, yeah, Larry wanted it shorter. I said, no, we have to have it taller because my dogs will jump over it. So
Okay, because the handout says 4 feet,
I know.
and
Changed it.
it's 60 inches, which is 5 feet in the,
It's 60 inches.
so 5 feet.
That's right.
Okay.
60 inches is what we'll go for, 5 feet. Sorry for the confusion on that.
That's okay. I would have done the same thing probably.
Okay, you can have a seat, and we'll have Mr. Duke up to. Do you have any comments regarding item number 3, Mr. Duke?
Just to say that your guidelines are not extremely specific on this type of fence. Certainly a metal fence is allowed, and generally your guidelines talk about those being appropriate for the front yard, and your guidelines certainly give a number of examples of places where we have metal or picket fences or wooden picket fences, such as the museum across the street. That's an appropriate use of that, and the height is correct. What's proposed here is a fence in the rear yard for the most part. If you I'll borrow Ms. Jennings' rendering here, but you can see that it really comes up about 2/3 of the way up the side of the house. It doesn't come to the front line. And certainly for the rest of the fence, it's all in the back. Your guidelines allow wooden privacy fence They would even allow a chain link fence in the rear of the property. So the fence that is proposed certainly is in a black color, which is muted and generally disappears visually for the most part, is I think within the intent of your guidelines, even though it doesn't speak specifically to that. Your guidelines, like I said, allow for even a privacy fence in the rear yard. So, and this is also similar to a fence that you allowed.
Mr. Carter?
Right.
Okay, that's what that was my question. Yeah, yes. Right next door, he's got pretty much the same type fence, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Duke.
Thank you.
And I don't know if you heard, Commissioners, what Mr. Duke was saying regarding the fence. The same fencing was approved for Mr. Carter's house, which is right next door to Ms. Jennings' house. So, okay, are there any questions? Is there a motion regarding item number 3?
I make a motion that we approve number 3 as requested.
Okay, a motion has been made. Is there a second?
Second.
I do have a question. We are approving item number 3 at a 5-foot height, correct? That's how it's written on my paperwork.
That's the way it's written.
60 inches.
That's the way it's written on the application.
Okay, and is that your intention? Okay, okay, very good. I just wanted to clarify that. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, and item number 3 is approved. And we're going to work our leg muscles one more time. If you'll come up, and we'll discuss item number 4, which we see that as replacing an exterior front light fixture.
And I'll just walk this around so you can see. This is the fixture that I'm proposing to replace the lovely black metal fixture that you see in your picture. So, this down. And that will be visible on the front porch area, and then there'll be 2 fixtures side by side on each side of the light, or each side of the front door. Other than, I don't know much about the fixture other than it's English. Is it period? It's close to what I've seen, and I'm trying to maintain the period fixtures for throughout the house and on the inside as well as the out. So that is my intent on this one, and I tried to show some illustrations on what it would look like in your photographs as well. I'm trying to think what else I wanted to mention about that. Now, question I have. Ceiling fans for the exterior, do I need to mention that at this time? If I wanted to put ceiling fans on the porch, period style? Because I forgot to.
Yeah, Mr. Duke, what is your... I don't think we've ever, that I can remember, have we ever had this before?
I thought I'd mention it now so I wouldn't get a letter later.
Yeah.
So,
Let me take a look here while you're talking about other items.
Okay. Well, why don't we do this? Let's go ahead and let you two sit down, and then let's go ahead and work on this, and then we'll deal with that.
Okay.
Okay. Are there any questions regarding this item number? I believe we're on what, 4?
4.
Is there a motion?
I will move that we grant appropriateness to item number 4.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All right. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, and item number 4 is approved. Okay, we're making progress here. Item number 5, create parking area along west side of the property as shown in the architectural rendering.
Okay, again, I'll use this board. This would come off of First Street, and it would be a gravel or small rock, mixture there coming across. The fence, it would be parking 1, 2. I'm on the 4 cars on the side. What I want to prevent is what we're doing now is pulling right off of First Street. As you notice, I for all the cars and truck service that I'm doing it too. But I want to, we don't have any roads to go.
Louise, can you talk about the walkway, the materials?
Flagstone, I was thinking Flagstone. What I wanted to do is try to use some of the brick that we try to reuse that. My understanding is it's
Okay.
not going to be. It
So
will
you're
disintegrate.
you're looking at flagstone coming
I was thinking
from or something of
Something,
equal
yeah.
all the way across.
Yeah, and this
Okay.
would be the pebble or the crushed rock, something like that around the back here. And I, maybe, yeah.
And replacing the the
Keep it
concrete
style.
there. Okay. Okay, Mr. Duke, would you have anything to offer us as far as staff report, information, guidelines on item number 5?
Certainly we will point out your guidelines and I'm sorry, I was trying to research a little bit on the fan, but I thought that the material is not concrete, it's not asphalt, it's just
Like the tiny pea gravel is, and then possibly flagstone for the walkway.
right. We will, and certainly we'll talk with Ms. Jennings. We probably ask for some kind of concrete turnout between the sidewalk and the asphalt. Just I know it. Sorry. Yes, the city just replaced the sidewalk up and down First Street, but the material is appropriate to your guidelines. The only thing that may be of an issue with your guidelines is really having to do with walkways, and if you're familiar with the guidelines on pages 44 and 45, it talks about many of the district residents have narrow concrete walkways connecting the sidewalk or the street to the main entrance. New walkways should follow these historic models. Again, these are guidelines. There's something you need to look at. Do you have a solid walkway now? You need to determine whether or not the flagstone is really appropriate for that location. Now, as far as the flagstones going off to the side, and I'm sorry I don't have a copy of that, but that's all right. I think I've got one. The flagstones off to the side. Sorry, make sure we get on tape. Flagstones off to the side are fine. From the steps to the street is really what we're talking about is where what your guidelines are speaking to. So other than that, the design is very consistent with your guidelines.
Mr. Duke, one question I have is the size of the parking pad. Does that meet our guidelines? Because I know in the past we have had some questions about that.
Right. Most of the questions in the past have really dealt with the parking pad being right out front, and where with a residential building is being converted to a commercial use.
Okay.
And certainly you'll probably notice in my analysis that was a consideration I looked at, is that the natural location for a driveway entrance to this site is off of First Street. From a traffic management standpoint, just adding other factors into the site, we certainly would not want to see access off of Washington. That's just traffic patterns are better off of First. If you add all of the factors in that we're looking at, preservation of the historic servants' quarters, preservation of the site, this is probably the most appropriate location for some parking. Otherwise, you're looking at accessing it off the rear quarter of the property, and that's probably not that appropriate. Screening is indicated, so I would hope that would be used. You certainly don't want to look at it from Washington Street and see a big parking lot. So
Okay.
that's the consideration there is you have to take the site in total
Okay.
and try to figure out how you make that work. if the service quarters weren't there, obviously that'd be a great spot. But that's right. That's right. So we have to kind of weigh those
Yeah.
those factors.
Okay, thank you. Do you have a question for Mr. Duke?
I have a question about the walkway to the entrance. What kind of material are we talking? Is it concrete now?
Let's see. I believe Ms.
I'm trying
Jennings
to
has
remember.
some pictures that show that.
Broken and pavers.
That's back. That's the
These are in the front.
front.
The best picture I think is in there is this one that just shows the base of the steps, but it's the width of the.
Is it concrete?
Just a flat slab. Yeah, concrete.
Well, are we saying that our guidelines say that the flagstone isn't appropriate and concrete would be more appropriate?
Well, I am pointing out where your guidelines speak specifically to what goes there. Now, keep in mind that that is a matter that you have not considered to be that central to the site. You recall the Gaston House on
They use
Washington Street.
stamp concrete.
Right, y'all allowed something a little bit different there. So, again, we're trying to make sure that we stay in some basic pattern and within reason. If we were flagstoning the whole front yard, that would be way out of bounds.
Right,
obviously.
right.
But we're talking about something basically the same width as what's there. I think that's probably okay. And it really, you also have to kind of look at how much more ornate is that's proposed than what. If you look at our guidelines all the way through, you'll find that some of our houses have I hate to use the word simple, but we're not talking about grand mansions. So what we're trying to do with the site is to make sure that you're respecting that structure and let it be the showpiece of the site, not your landscaping or your site improvements. So that's really what your guidelines are speaking to, is maintain that more traditional, just like we're talking about with the roof aspect, so that the structure is, like I said, the showpiece of the site. So if you believe that this is not going to detract, or what's proposed by the applicant doesn't detract, then I think you're within bounds of your guidelines.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Oh, I have a design question, I suppose. Why does your drawing not show the walkway as wide as the steps themselves from the street?
I will blame that on the architect.
It just seems a little incongruous there. Yeah. Well, yeah, and you see what
I think the
I'm
intention was to make it a little wider
As
so
wide.
it balances, but I think that was just a suggested material. So, yes, that walk area will be
The
as
same
wide, so
width
it balances with the
right.
steps.
Okay. Since our hex stones are no longer available, the flagstone may have to substitute as for that
Right.
traditional.
Okay, are there any questions for Ms. Jennings regarding item number 5? Okay, thank you. Okay, that's kind of a lot to consider for item number 5. If we do not have any further questions for Mr. Duke or Ms. Jennings, do we have a motion to be made regarding this item?
I would make a motion that we grant approval to item number 5 under the condition that the existing walkway that the layout of it is retained. Not necessarily the concrete, but the layout of it is retained. If you want to use flagstone, that's fine, but that's my motion.
Okay, a motion has been made. Is there a second?
So to approve everything, including that, and you just
Well,
added.
we need to make a second motion first,
Second.
right? Okay, now it's open for discussion. Mr. Gray?
Oh, I was just, you said to approve everything and make sure the sidewalk was the same width as the.
Right, same layout.
Same layout, okay, I agree, okay, thank you.
And we are talking about the front walkway.
Right.
Okay, we have a second. All in favor, say aye.
All right,
Chair votes aye, and item number 5 is approved. Okay, our last item is create an open garden with semi-covered patio areas. Ms. Jennings, would you like to present this last item? Is there a problem? Are we missing something?
No.
Okay.
Basically, this is a proposed landscape master plan where the pavilion and the arbor and things like that. So, is it all laid out? Have I determined everything? No. Whether it's a water feature, that's typically what we will do. Something in that, and mainly it's to coincide with when you walk in the front of the house, you look straight through the back window, you can see all the way through. I think that's in keeping with the designs of most of the homes of that period, so you have a complete view through.
Can I say one thing?
Sure.
Mr. Duke, if Ms. Jennings, she's already requested this, but she seems to be a little bit unsure at this point as to the placement, what exactly she wants. Could she bring this back once she finishes the house? Could she bring this back without having to pay her fee again, and then discuss this with more details and a more concrete plan?
The way you've handled that in the past is you basically have just taken that and tabled it.
Okay.
And held it for a certain time period
Gotcha.
so that it's still an open item, and certainly that would allow Ms. Jennings to come back.
Okay.
So she'd just notify Ms. Morgan, she wants to come back and be on the agenda, and then
Gotcha.
somebody would have to bring it off the table.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
How much do you need to know as far as landscaping? Is that something I have to get? If I need to plant a shrub, do I have to come back for approval?
Now,
What do I need? Because that's something that I had intended on doing in the next 30 days.
Mr. Duke, please go ahead and cover this, and that way any mistakes that I made, you won't have to redo what I'm falsely telling her.
Your landscaping guidelines are a little. They are generally intended to be just that, guidelines, whereas your certificate of appropriateness is looking more at the structure. Okay, your state law talks really about the historic structure. Of course, it also talks about the site. If you're, and you can make these things in generalities as well. I mean, we're talking about. Let me give you an example. If the commission is okay with this general layout and she makes some tweaks to it as far as moving a water feature here or pavilion a little bit this way or that way, if you approve some general statements saying that it basically matches this, that there's nothing that's brought forward of the rear line of the house or something like that, make some basic statements about the design, then you're well within your guidelines. Okay.
But basically, we are concerned with any structures that Ms. Jennings puts up in the backyard and the placement of those structures.
Right.
We've got our guidelines to recommend and suggest for her landscaping, but we really are not here to approve that.
That is an area that long ago, 2008, when you put together these guidelines, you were looking at what would be of great concern. You did not deal with siding, for instance, whether or not that's going to be regulated. You didn't deal with color. Landscaping, you recognize as something that you should make suggestions about, but not something that you should be regulating very closely, simply because that's not been the desire of the public the folks in the district. They accepted your guidelines as laid out. Excuse me. So I would say that that's not an area that you really have been involved in.
Okay.
But we do want the parking area to be screened with.
Right.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, right, and I think it's certainly acceptable to make some general statements. I mean, there are definite structures that are shown here. Now, your guidelines speak to that, and what she is proposing is appropriate given your guidelines, and certainly the location in the rear of the yard and behind the rear line is good. I mean, it's mostly what you see here is not going to be very visible at all from the road, and it's not going to detract from the property, in my opinion. So,
Can we approve this, or do we need to approve it with the stipulation that materials for the pavilion and the arbor are revisited at another time?
Ms. Cheese, that's up to the board. I mean, I think you're well within your responsibilities to do either one. So I won't try to get into that very.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Duke. Okay, what are the wishes of the commission at this time? We've have a few options that have been mentioned. Is there a motion to move forward with any particular option at this time?
I think we should move forward with approval, with some conditions that placement, materials, and design minimize the effect on the house.
Okay, a motion has been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, is there any discussion at this time?
I want to make a historical point. There, about where your pavilion is on this plan, and toward the front of the house, there was once a boxwood maze, which the man who had lived there at one time was an outstanding arborist, and there was a boxwood maze, and I was dismayed when I saw it destroyed. I'm not.
I love the gardening, so I'd like to create something very nice back there, and I'd like to add something to the front, and it's not drawn on there, but nothing that's going to detract, but I didn't.
No, and I'm not suggesting that you do that. I'm just giving you historical note.
Glad to know that, thank you.
Okay, yes, we do have a motion and a second to approve this request. So all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes nay.
Nay.
Okay, but we do have a majority voting aye, so it is passed. And that takes care of you. Item number 6, correct? Mr. Duke? Yes. He's wanting to say something.
I'm not sure that there was a question about fans, and I will just speak to that. Again, that's not as long as it's not visible or readily visible, hanging down below the edge of the porch, I think that's more than appropriate. I imagine somebody would have thought of having a fan there in the past. They probably would have, but
So as long as it's not visibly obtrusive, we're good.
right. I mean,
Okay.
Your guidelines speak to porches and talk about preserving them, and certainly nothing that's proposed with a fan would detract from that.
Okay.
Did you mention something else?
Yes, the servants' quarters is
Here, come on up to the mic.
and this was an addendum, and I'd forgotten about it until I mentioned it to Joel last. He said, just throw that in as an addendum, and it's in the back of your book. What happens to these structures? This first of all, the wood that you find in these structures is very solid, and you can't get this. They don't grow trees like this anymore. So to take it down and replace with like is impossible. But what happens to the lower portion, as you probably know, is the water in the drip line bounces back up and rots the lower portion of the wood or whatever is exposed. And that's what's happened around this structure. What someone had suggested is that we wrap it or take out the rotten portion, because that's just an invitation for termites and more rot, and it's going to eventually go to the ground. Let's take that bottom portion off and replace it with a band of a hardy plank material that is similar in style, and then paint it to coordinate with the house and trim it out and make it look like a feature instead of, something that's going to, there's no way to match it. You can see how it looks when they've tried to do that in the past, and it doesn't line up. So that was the suggestion there. So I wanted to ask permission to see if we could do that while my guys are there on site doing the repairs, that we can incorporate that in.
Okay, are there any questions for Ms. Jennings regarding this addendum at this moment?
You're not talking about painting it differently. You say make it a feature?
Well, yeah, in the house is, we're basically going back with the painted lady style. We're thinking pink and green and yellow. Teasing, still. Erase that. Just kidding. But anyway, it'll coordinate with the house colors, which are basically tans, and I think we've got a dark green in there.
But now, it would not be different in and of itself? It would not be a band of separate color around the base of this house?
But instead of trying to make it match, because it's not going to match, trim it out with a piece so you can show that make it like you're trimming out a door. You trim the band. You make it, that's how you typically treat that. If you can't hide something, you might as well enhance it with some type of feature. And you can trim it out where it looks like it's a beveled edge or something like that, some type of edge, and the carpenters are good at doing that. Like a door casing is not just the door, it's...
So this is going to be a trim piece.
Right, that would be the trim piece too.
And this is your new part.
Right.
And this is your original.
That's correct. So this color and this color would typically match. You have, and this is just an example. You may have a 2-inch or whatever the band
I
might
don't
be.
like that.
And this is just a suggestion, but that's basically what I was thinking. That's the best way to make the repair without making it look terribly tacky. It's what they've done in the past. It's not fixed, but
Louise, are you going to replace that with a tin roof?
that roof's in great shape.
Oh, it is?
It does
It
not.
just doesn't, it looks kind of rough.
It does, believe me.
But it's in good shape, okay.
The critters that live in there now love it, I can assure you. So there's not a problem. So anyway, but
I don't know,
that's...
this kind of Disney looking to me. I don't know, I just...
Mr. Duke, can you come up? I am a little unsure as to how do we go about adding this? So I'll need your direction on that initially, and then a brief staff report regarding the banding.
Okay. Well, I don't think there is any prohibition about considering something. Oftentimes, discussions of certificates of appropriateness lead to something else on a site, and y'all have dealt with that pretty liberally. Now, as far as how do you deal with this, what we would be looking at is whether or not there's an outbuilding. Of course, this is an outbuilding, and your guidelines make one statement, and that is historic outbuildings shall be or should be retained and maintained. There's a lot that can go into that statement, okay? Maintaining them and retaining them and maintaining them means, of course, that you've got to replace things that wear out, rot away. So I am not going to stand here and disagree with Ms. Jennings in that the difficulty of matching any of this siding is very simple, and that's the point I would make. Anything that you do to replace that, create a band around this, should be simple. It should not be distinguished by anything other than the minimum that's needed to create that repair. And you have simple ribs going vertically. If you're going to put a line that kind of hides the seam for the new board, then it should be as simple as the vertical. It should be the same size of wood as far as the piece. It should not stick out any further. And should be painted the same as the whole building should be painted one color. It's a very simple building. If anything were to be different, would be the roof, which it already is, and maybe the awnings. But the wooden structure should be, like I said, maintain it as simple as possible. But it's obvious that there's going to be, at some point, if you're going to try to meet your guideline of retaining and maintaining, you're going to have to make some changes to these buildings. The other solution is to go back and try to replace the whole siding so that there's no seam, and that's very difficult. And Ms. Jennings was pointing out the repair that was made here. You can see it on the corner. It's very difficult to make that. Once you have a seam, that's going to pull away as the wood dries. It's going to show up. So I think what's being proposed is one option. Trying to make it as simple a repair as possible is what you really should be looking at. To call attention to it, I think adds more to the structure than it really sitting there today is doing. It's again, it's servants' quarters. It's supposed to be lesser than the main house. You know, it's supposed to put the servants in their place, right? So, but so you want to make sure you respect that style and keep it. But it is a unique structure. We don't have many of these left. Certainly, we talked about the garages that have disappeared, the garage apartments that have disappeared. Certainly, the slave quarters. Excuse me, wrong term. Wrong time period. The servants' quarters have disappeared as well.
Thank you, Mr. Duke. Any questions regarding these alterations with Mr. Duke? Okay, is there a motion at this time for a certificate of appropriateness to make alterations to the servant quarters of this home? Okay, is there a motion?
I move that we approve the repair to the slave house quarters, servant quarters, excuse me. And if Ms. Jennings heard what Mr. Duke said, that's the way my motion is.
I think we're going to have to make it a little bit more specific. We talked about the hardy plank around the base of it.
Okay, I'll make that into that motion.
And the solid color.
Single color.
Okay.
And I agree with that. That goes into my motion.
Okay, so we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, and it is approved. Very good. Thank you. I would like to say, Ms. Jennings, that my nay in our previous item was strictly due to the fact that I do like to see the materials of an outbuilding or a gazebo or, anything that is added. I feel very uncomfortable approving something without, the materials being shown to make sure that they do meet our requirements. So that was strictly, I'm all for, a nice gazebo. I just like to see a little bit more detail before I approve that.
Submit that for approval.
Well, it has been approved already. Yes, I just personally voted nay on it, and I wanted to clarify that is why we just, I feel uncomfortable approving something without
Well,
materials.
same here.
Yeah, and gray too. So, but thank you for coming. You're doing a great job. You're really outdoing the neighbors on First Street, I must say. So, thank you.
Thank y'all very much. I appreciate it.
Okay, our last. Louise, do you want these back? Oh yeah, I would love that. Thank you.
Souvenir booklet.
Thank you. That's very nice. Mr. and Ms. Abernathy, whoever or both. Okay, Mr. Abernathy, if you'll come and sign in. And then we will do like we did with Miss Jennings and take, I think there are maybe a few items, I'm not sure. Yes, we'll take one item at a time. And our crowd has diminished.
We had lost Will. We still have Will. I'd like to ask a question right off before we get started. Do you have a historic plaque on your house?
No, ma'am, we don't.
I was just looking at this designation, Davis Hobby, but you don't have one, so that's
Yeah.
okay.
The Hobbies never really did very much to the house at all. And they were the owners. Well, I guess Till McDowell bought it from the Davises.
I live
And
there.
they were going to put a law office in there. And the neighbors wouldn't let them, they voted it out. And the Hobbies bought it. And they really didn't do anything much to the house at all. And then when their son was killed in that airplane crash, they really didn't even go back to the house, and we bought it from them and went from there. I guess the only notoriety that the house really has that William Davis was a mayor of Prattville, and of course Mayor Price, I think, spent some of his youth in that house.
I lived there.
Yeah.
We rented that. My grandmother did
Yeah.
for while I was in high school. I lived there for 6 years.
Now, who owned it at that time?
William Davis. Well,
Yeah, it stayed in the family for, I don't know, I guess, my guess is that Till McDowell probably bought it. His law firm probably bought it in the 70s.
is that artesian well still in the back?
Artesian well is still operating.
Okay, good. That's great. It was good to sleep by.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go ahead and get started, and we can walk down memory lane after this. Let's see. Our first item, Mr. Abernathy, is approval for use of a different material for the low roof areas. Currently using asphalt shingles, sorry,
Yeah.
considering a standing seam metal, slate-looking shingle, or metal panels. So we will need some clarification on that. So let's talk
Yeah.
about that first.
Okay. The house, and it's possible I may just want to go back with the shingles, but the problem that I have with the shingles, we're talking about the roofs that it's not on the second floor. We're talking about porch roofs. There's an entryway at the back. There's also there's a bay window area on the house. And if we do some of the addition, there'll be some additional low roof that I would do out of the same material. The big maintenance problem that I have is you can't put gutters on that house and keep them clean. You're so high in the air, it's almost impossible to keep them clean, and the water falling from the second floor roof down to the first floor, it eats through those asphalt shingles in short order. In just a few years, it'll start leaking, and that's why I'm looking at other alternatives. The standing seam metal, I know there's a house on Wetumpka that the entire house is a standing seam metal, and it's probably a galvanized standing seam roof. It's a nice, very nice looking roof. It's a standing seam metal. I think if y'all have all of the information that I turned in, okay. The front porch roof, yeah, and I desperately need to do the front porch roof. If you look, this where it's at in the end of my submission, I guess, let me just pull these two out. And y'all probably have the same thing, but I'm not sure. If here you see a house that has asphalt upper roof and shingles, standing on the low roofs. And that's the way the house would look. There's another picture of a house with green standing seam that's next. It looks very similar to our house. And you see that there's another house, the entire house is standing seam, and it's a green standing seam, which is very similar to our house. The appearance would be very, very similar. That's probably the color of the standing seam metal. They have a variety of colors. The colors on the back, the colors that I have looked at and have actually thought about was the house at some point in time had a red roof on it, and it was the little shingles, metal shingles that were about yay wide and about yay long, that were seamed together all over the house, and that was what was on the house originally. And so going back to metal wouldn't be a big jump at all. And the colors that I think would look a green, the right color green would look good. The right color red would look good, and probably a medium bronze color. And I think probably the metal roof like the one on Wetumpka would probably look good on it also. So really, there's 4 choices of colors that you could go with that would work really nice as far as and be in keeping with the house. One of the other items that I have looked at, and the one that I think I like the most, but it may be so expensive when it's all said and done that I can't do it, is for lack of a better word, a faux slate roof, which the one that's the Symphony Certainty is one manufacturer. There's a lot of manufacturers, and there's a couple of and Symphony seems to only have like 3 blends, and they have a Colonial Gray blend and a Capital blend, which I think would be the best blends for the house. And it's these 2 at the top. Right here. These colors. This color and this color would be the 2 best colors. It's simulated. Because when I was still working for 4 engineers, we put it on several buildings for the VA in Tuscaloosa. And they like it pretty good. These are the 2 colors that I selections for a color to match the house. The other thing that I put in, and I'm not totally sure if I would like it that much, is they've started making panels of metal. They can simulate the slate, they can simulate shakes and this type of stuff, and they look pretty good, but I just don't think they look as good as a standing seam metal would do, or even the composite slate material. Those are, but they're very expensive, and it may turn out to the point I have to go back and use the shingles. The shingles that's on my house, the company is no longer in business. It was Elk Manufacturing, and the GAF now is the one big panel that I did is essentially the color that's on my roof right now. That's essentially what's on the house right now.
I think at this point it would be beneficial for us to hear a staff report from Mr.
Yeah.
Duke, and then have you come back up, Mr. Abernathy, and see what kind of questions we would have at that point.
Well, we've talked about 3 different roofs today, so we'll talk about another. This will be our third, excuse me. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Well, no, I was just going to ask you, I'm sure it would be beneficial to you, Mr. Duke, to not have to discuss, all 3 of these options.
Well,
Yes.
Again, the roofing material question is not so much the issue as it is whether or not it detracts from the structure. That being said, it's funny to listen sometimes about what's historically been on some of these structures. You don't necessarily expect to find there. I believe Ms. Kirkpatrick agreed that there was a red roof at one time, and that's certainly more appropriate maybe for this structure than the first one we discussed, which was a little more simple in design. Any of these that Mr. Abernathy is discussing is probably acceptable, certainly on the secondary roofs, the low roof areas as he describes it. And just to make sure, you would certainly want to make sure that the colors and really the style of the roofs, the style of the roofing material, were compatible. Okay, you don't want to have something that's widely different than the main shingled roof. You certainly want to make sure it's compatible. Obviously, that's what Mr. Abernathy wants to do as well. So I don't think there's any issue there. But these lower roofs that catch the rainwater falling from way up high, they tend to wear out a lot faster. They don't have as much pitch on them to drain the water off as quickly. Certainly something that's a little more durable is desirable, and it certainly is acceptable. So really looking at making sure it's compatible with what he's putting on the rest of the structure. From what's been described, I don't hear anything that would be way out of line, in my opinion. Now, your guidelines speak to really retaining something that's no longer on this structure. The original roof is long gone. We have a few structures left in town, such as the servants' quarters we were just discussing with the last application, where the historic roof is still there. You would certainly want to try to maintain that if at all possible, but that's not a consideration here. So Was that helpful, or did?
No, I think it's
Okay.
very helpful. Thank you, Mr. Duke. Are there any questions for Mr. Duke? You sure?
Don't we need to know exactly what he's gonna use, or are you saying any of these would be okay?
I'm saying that it would be, as I said with Mr. Booth, it would be helpful to know within a couple of different options.
Right.
What Mr. Abernathy has presented are several. And if we could narrow it down a little tighter, it would make it certainly, I'm sure, easier for him and definitely for those of us who have to make sure your desires are enforced. So.
Mr. Barrett, do you have a question for Mr. Duke?
Mr. Price.
Answered it? Okay. Okay, Mr. Abernathy, is there a way that we can narrow all of these great options down to maybe one or
Well,
two?
What, I'd say like 3. And the first one is keep what I've got. You know, that's not really a change. The second one or the third one, whatever, one of them would be the standing seam metal, and the other be the composite material, the faux slate.
Okay, what about this? At what point will you be able to narrow this down? I'm sure a lot of it is, finances, seeing how much, these are your quotes will be.
What I was thinking is, as I was sitting there listening, what I thought about, what I could do is when I know what I feel like I want to use, I could contact Mr. Duke, let him know, and he could let you know what I was looking at, and go from there.
I personally, but y'all outnumbered me a while ago. I personally like to see, before I vote on something, more exactly what is going to go on there, a more definitive look. What are the thoughts of the commission on this?
I would like to see a more definite plan too for the roof, just because of the visibility of the structure.
So an option for us, Mr. Abernathy, at this time would be to, we all have an idea now of what you're wanting to do. And I think that Mr. Duke has made it clear that the differentiation between the two are acceptable as far as that goes. We just would like to know more detail, more specifics about exactly what you're going to use. So we could table this at this time, and then when you do get your quotes and you narrow it down to one, maybe,
Well,
we could vote and approve it at that point.
Let me throw this thought out.
Okay.
If I use standing seam metal, if we sold the house down the road and ever who the new owner was, they could put the same type roof back on the second floor and it wouldn't affect how that low roof looks at all, because there's a lot of houses in the area, and one of the houses that I showed you where they had the low roofs out of metal, and I think part of that was because of the wind falling. It wouldn't affect, you could still go back with shingles on the high roof, and they're up high. They don't wear out like they do on the low roofs. And it might be more expedient at this time to say that I'll just use standing seam metal for that purpose.
Well, I think
And
if
it
you
would-
do say that, then we can definitely move on into another level of discussion and questioning. But yes, you should probably talk to Ms. Abernathy about this.
Does that make sense?
We're glad to help you out.
All right.
Then we're gonna talk
Let's
about
just,
Okay.
I'll either stick with what I've got or I'll go our standing seam metal.
Okay. Now let's proceed on the basis that we're going to choose the standing seam metal. Otherwise, you don't need us, okay? Are there any questions? I'm sure there are questions. What questions do we have for Mr. Abernathy now that we have made a determination of the materials?
And did we determine the color?
We have not done that.
Okay. Should we do that?
Mr. Miss Abernathy, would you like to sign in and okay, Mr. Abernathy? You know, when we talked, you were here when we talked to Mr. Booth. The shiny metal, the darker metal, the grays, charcoals, those are obviously some that we are in favor of.
The medium bronze, which is kind of it's a kind of a brown, I guess.
We don't have any photos.
Ma'am? Well,
There are no photos of the colors.
We have these.
Oh, okay.
And I can't really tell what's in that one picture. It's just the one. That house, when I was looking through the internet and I happened to see that house that favored our house a good bit, and with a green roof on it, it looked kind of nice. But our house is not as yellow as that house, so I'm not sure that green. But
Is this what we're looking at?
Medium bronze.
let's see if I can.
And it is very difficult to discern the exact color.
Here's what they're showing. This is, here's what they're showing as a medium.
Okay.
Is this right here?
Okay.
It's this.
Okay.
I would not have called that bronze at all.
What is the color of the existing roof?
It looks like that right there.
I would think that for keeping with the same tone, either a black, a gray, or an unfinished tin would be appropriate. I don't know about the medium bronze. Just not familiar with that.
It's the roof has a green tint to it, and that bronze has a green tint to it. Yeah, the ones that I have seen and dealt with over the years, and in being in construction, a dark bronze almost looks black, and yeah. But I'm not sure black would look right on that house. I think it needs to be a little different.
It definitely, it's such a unusual color and such a vague description of the color too, that if just speaking for myself, I would prefer, once again, to be able to see a sample of that before we approved the color of this. I think I kind of sense some of the same feelings coming from my fellow commissioners here. I think we're definitely on the right track. We've narrowed it down, and that's great. But I do think, because it seems to be an unusual color that we are not as familiar with as you are, it would be very beneficial for us to see a sample. What time frame are you wanting to do this in, Mr. Abernathy?
The roof, I need to get started on it, pretty quick.
Like within 4 weeks, 6 weeks?
Within 4 weeks, I'd like to try. And what I might be able to do is, by the time that you would be meeting again, I might even be able to bring a sample. And say,
That's what I'm
"All right,
thinking.
This is what it looks.
Yeah.
It's going to look like."
Okay. Commissioners, what are your thoughts on this as far as how do you feel?
Could we table this till Mr. Abernathy returns with that information for us?
We can do whatever. There's a motion made, seconded, and approved. Absolutely. Mr. Abernathy, commissioners, I personally don't want to lead Mr. Abernathy on that we are leaning toward an approval based on a color. But that's how I feel that we are doing. Is the color of the roof is what we're unsure about at this point. So is there a motion to table this until we do have a sample from Mr. Abernathy of the color, maybe a couple of colors to bring back a month from now and then have an approval at that time?
Are you suggesting we table item 1 or table the application?
No, item one at this time. Based on Mr. Abernathy bringing in a sample for us to look at before we make a decision.
And one of the reasons I had the roof first on there was because the addition, everything goes with it. That roof is going to go with it. So
I move we table item 1.
Okay, if there's a second, all in favor say aye.
Aye. Chair
votes aye, and we will table that just based on a sample being brought in. Mr. Abernathy, with Mr. Booth, a charcoal, a black, that's all pretty basic and standard, and we all kind of know what we're talking about. But if you can get your hands on that, that would be fantastic.
okay.
Okay, and let's move on to item number 2. Our item number 2, Mr. Abernathy, is a kitchen addition at the southwest corner of the house, replacing an existing deck. So if you can give us your ideas and specifics on that, we'll go from there.
Okay. There's an existing deck at the back of the house that covers approximately 22 by 19 feet, and that's what the addition would be. And it would be off the west wall of the kitchen that it would be. The quick story behind all of this, everybody wants to be in the kitchen for some reason nowadays. And so the kitchen, are the people that wants to be in the kitchen's outgrown the room that's available, and that's what we're looking at. Where is my? So I make sure I'm. And I would like to also, after I get the kitchen addition, is extend and continue a covered deck on from that. Another item that's in that, and this particular item has to be redone, regardless where anything else gets approved or not. And it's a handicap ramp. 2 years ago, my wife broke her ankle, and we've got a temporary handicap ramp in there for people to get in and out. Well, since we put it in, a lot of our friends, they can't get in and out of the house except with a ramp. And so it's become kind of indispensable. And there is a way to incorporate the ramp without, and it can only be seen from almost where the people would come in and go on the ramp, or directly standing west up where it's at right now. And it would essentially be hid from everyone.
Okay.
The other thing that, with relation to the ramp, is there is it's one of the other items, but all this kind of goes together. At the back door, one of the low roofs, it comes down, stops at the edge of the house, and we have a deck that walks along the back. this is just like, it's almost like a walkway that goes, that's elevated, that goes. Well, this is the kitchen, right? This is the kitchen, right here. This direction. This is the south side. Yeah, yes. This is the west. So it would be directly west. And this walkway would actually go into the door on the addition, or either go on to the, it goes, right now it goes to the deck in the back of the house. It's an extension. Mainly what would be going in is, heating and ceiling. Heating and ceiling.
Kitchen extension would come out of here.
It would come out, even with the edge of the deck, it would come out. And, anyway, this part of the deck, that goes all the way down the side of the house. And I want to cover this upper part, and then when I get to this area, I'm gonna come down and cover where the back shows.
But I'll bring the ramp,
Turn around and go right straight back down where this one's coming down.
and it will be, because what I have,
And there was a little 8x8 deck, and it works out almost perfect. You just make that 90 degrees and go right back in. And, everything in, the traffic flow and all, and the steps coming down, are all back the way they were. And it works again.
right now, it don't work like it should.
Okay. Got a lot of information here, and let's just go back to item number 2.
Okay.
Kitchen addition at the southwest corner. Let me have you take a seat, Mr. Abernathy,
Okay.
and let Mr. Duke come up and just explain. We do have very specific guidelines regarding additions. And Mr. Duke, can you remind us and refresh our memory on those?
Sure. Yes, ma'am. You have them listed there in the staff report. Talks about additions. If you have your guidelines, they're listed on page 40. Additions to dwellings are appropriate as long as they're placed on rear elevations or non-readily visible side elevations. Additions should be designed to complement the historic qualities of the dwelling. We talked about with Ms. Jennings' addition that should cause minimal damage or removal of historic walls. The proposed, and just make sure everybody is aware, you should have a copy of Mr. Abernathy's drawing in your packet. Has everybody located that? Okay, it's going to be, there are a couple of site plans in there, but there's this one that's got the red markings on it that show the addition in relation to the rest of the site. As it's proposed, it does not damage the existing structure. It comes out of an existing opening there on the side of the building. So that guideline is well met. Additions should have no or limited visibility from the street. That's item number 2. We'll come back to that in a second. Additions, item number 3, additions should be compatible with the original building in scale, proportion, rhythm, and materials. We have a substantial structure here, so in addition, the scale is talked about is not really an issue. The materials are something we need to discuss. Mr. Abernathy did not cover that in detail, but I believe it's his intention to come close to meeting what's already present in the main structure. Additions should be distinguishable from the historic building, and certainly that would be the case here. Number 5, then they should not try to imitate earlier styles. So I think while we probably need a little more information on the design, that we don't quite have an issue with number 5. Number 3 number 2 is probably the most relevant item in your guidelines, and that's because the lot that this house sits on, these lots were actually oriented. You can see in the survey they were originally oriented. There are 3 lots. They're oriented more towards Northington Street than Second or Main Street. So there's a good bit of side yard on the western side of the lot, and that's the natural location you would want to add an addition. That is presently screened off very well by some evergreens along the front line of the property, but the commission needs to kind of consider how that would look if those evergreens were not present, and what impact that might have on the site. So that's really the that and the materials that are proposed for the addition. There's a rendering in this packet that shows and Mr. Abernathy, I'm sure, can speak more to this, the addition, and shows how that looks from the front of the house, and how it extends out roughly 22 feet of heated and cooled space and an additional area under roof that would be a porch. So.
I have one question at this point. Visibility from Main Street, do we have any drawings that would...
Yes, ma'am.
The elevation page, okay, and the windows is what I was wanting to see.
This would be your elevation.
This is the new addition.
This one in the lower corner here would be your view from Main Street.
And it's just got one window on it. Let me find it in my packet, I'm sorry.
Okay, what questions do you have for Mr. Duke right now? All right, thank you, Mr. Duke. Sure. Mr. Abernathy, like Mr. Duke has presented, in our guidelines and policies for the HPC, we do like to see additions more toward the back so that it is not visibly present from the street. What options do you have in meeting that guideline of the HPC? What options do you have of building your addition more towards the back rather than out that side?
Essentially none, because there is a carport shop building that's directly off of the back corner of the kitchen in the house. If about 10 or 12 feet gets you into the driveway going to the south, and it probably wouldn't work real well at all as far as the layout and all is concerned. I think it would probably end up being a much more expensive endeavor to try to do that, because I think it would take an extensive renovation of the kitchen, where now it wouldn't with this.
Okay, thank you. Okay, commissioners, do we kind of at a standstill, it seems, as far as questions? I know we are all kind of looking over it and trying to absorb. This is quite a large project for us to... Go ahead. No. Yeah, that's all I was going to say, Gray, is just what questions or thoughts do you have?
I just wondered what time frame on the kitchen, or what is the main thing you need to do as soon as possible, besides the roof that you're gonna bring to us?
That is the biggest thing. I can do the roof and not touch any of the walls or anything like that and have that area covered. In fact, I submitted an amendment, and apparently, first time I read over the guidelines, I missed this because I had in my mind I was going to make the addition, look like the old house, and I see that that's not what you want. So I got to looking, and what I did as phase one would be to do the roof for the upper deck area, tie in the breezeway with the over to the carport, do the deck handicap ramp, and just enlarge the upper deck just to be under the roof, or partial, or the part that needs to be under the roof, because it's going to be a little bit wider than what the deck is. And it would be relatively simple just to support the roof area and bring the deck, and it would just look like a porch. And what I would do is stop it at the proposed end of where the proposed kitchen would be stopped, and not do any additional deck at this time. But at some point in time, the way the construction would be, you could come in and finish the roof out over that, and it wouldn't be any trouble at all if you're using trusses to set the roof.
Well, Mr. Abernathy, would it be too much trouble for you to get with Mr. Duke when y'all can get some time together and go over this and just see how it would better meet our guidelines? Because right now it's confusing to me. I mean, could you help Joel with going over it with Mr. Abernathy to maybe fit our guidelines better?
Well, yes.
Because
question, absolutely, we can certainly.
The way it sticks out, I mean, if those shrubs weren't there, it would really violate. Well, it does violate our guidelines.
I think there's, it's possible maybe you could modify this. I agree with Mr. Abernathy in that he is limited in locations
Right.
where he can add on. He has a great deal of lot there to the west of the structure. It could be that there are different ways to screen this off. You also have to keep in mind that the rendering that you're looking at is two-dimensional, and this is going to be set back at the back corner of the existing structure. But what I hear you saying is that we need to look at it a little bit and maybe look at other options that, like I said, I think some extension of that west yard is acceptable. It's going to have to be, making it plain that the Abernathys need to have some use of their property, obviously, but it's possible maybe we could turn the location of the porch towards the back of the house. There could be a turn in the roof, and it could be set back. I don't know. There are certainly different ways we could look at this. There could be some more permanent screening of some description. And believe me, what I was trying to say before is that the commission needs to understand that the landscaping is temporary. The structure is going to be a little more permanent. But if you feel like the landscaping can be maintained and it's adequately hidden that way, then that might be acceptable. It's really just, our analysis is really trying to help you understand the context and how what they're proposing sits on the property. These sessions have always been very conversational, and that's the way, of course, it's been today. And we're just trying to get to an understanding of
Mr. Abernathy, you're not, this is not a pressing issue right now. This could be up to a year away. Is that my understanding?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
The,
Yes, except for, yeah.
all right.
Well, what we have done as a commission before with projects of this depth and this intensity is, we have gotten the information. We have worked with the homeowner or the business owner has worked with Mr. Duke's office to come together and find a good compromise. We want you to be able to use your property and we support you and we totally understand. Many of us are old homeowners ourselves. What we want is for you to be happy and for our guidelines to be met to the very best of the ability of the two of us. And also we've gone on field trips, literally, where we all meet at the site and talk about things. And so if it is not a pressing issue for you at this point, within the next 4 weeks, and it doesn't seem to be, if we possibly could table this and have you get together with Mr. Duke and myself, or however we can work that out, and kind of look at things that way, and then it would also give the commissioners the opportunity to drive by and get a visual. If you're not in a hurry, I think that would just be beneficial to all of us.
As far as starting the addition, the one thing that I would kind of like to have, I think I included this in what I gave you, but it was just a sketch that I had. And it may not have copied very well. But what I wanted to do with this is just a sketch. This is the low roof area right here. And what this low roof area would extend about 5 feet to cover that upper deck walkway and kind of make it weatherproof, more or less. And this, to redo this roof, I need to be able to do this at the same time. But I can start it right here. And it really would not affect anything. And I can add to it and put stuff, for example. This would be about a month. I wouldn't want to start this till after you all do this. But I would like to at least do this much of this at the time I did that. Is that what it is? And this is on the back. Yeah, the addition would be coming in. And what this does, the addition actually comes out to here. This is just the upper deck, and when we first started thinking about it, we just have a screen porch back here. Just keep the mosquitoes away. And, it's not it don't go out near as much, and that may still be the solution to everything.
You want more room in here.
I'd like to have more room in here. Yeah.
This could still be something that could be presented when you present your
Yeah.
roof, and then possibly have just a
moving forward. It's just going to take a little while.
We want to work with you. It's just, it's a lot to take in.
Well, it is quite a bit.
Commissioners, at this time, I think that it would be appropriate just to offer up a motion to table this until our next meeting. Well, how would we do that, Joel? Just table it and then somebody bring it up? I'm sorry. Or postpone? What would you suggest?
Right. The proper parliamentary term is just to hold it over to the next
Okay.
meeting. If you table it, it's
It's got to be brought back.
right.
A
So
motion to be,
basically,
okay.
somebody can just make a motion that it's held over
Okay.
until the next regular meeting.
Okay.
We've already tabled the roofing part.
Right.
Okay. So at this point, is there a motion then to hold items 2 through, what would that be? Or would we need to do them separately, Joel?
At this point, they're not on the table separately. You
Okay.
can just hold just a simple motion to hold the remainder of the application.
Okay, okay. So is there a motion at this time to hold this until our next regularly scheduled meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, chair votes aye, and I'll get together with Mr. Duke and Mr. Abernathy, and we'll work on this and let you know. Okay?
Perhaps would there be a site visit between now and
Absolutely.
the next officially scheduled meeting?
A field trip, yes.
Yes.
That would be my recommendation. The rules
Okay.
on that
Yes.
is you have to give at least 24 hours notice, and we have to post that as being an official meeting. So we'll need to set that up. Anytime you're present all together, and have
Mm-hmm. Okay.
a quorum, that's an official meeting.
But we can set that up aside from
Correct. Yes.
right now.
can.
Okay. Then, Mr. Abernathy, we'll be in touch with you, and in a month from now, we will all do this again, and hopefully have some samples and a better understanding of exactly what's going on. Yes. Okay. The miscellaneous items that we have on our agenda, Mr. Duke, would you like to kind of just explain those quickly, or we're going to have a break and
No, quickly
to the
we can,
restroom, so,
quickly we can do
yes.
that. These are items that we list
you're
on your
done?
agenda.
Yes,
as
thank you
being-
so much.
We list items on your agenda that we have approved from a staff level in the preceding month. So just for information, this is based on your change in your policy and procedure. 338 First Street, I believe I might have mentioned that at the last time you met, although you did not have an official meeting. That was where the chimney on the back of the kindergarten school, or originally the Autauga County High School, was struck by lightning. The state building commission told the Board of Education that they needed to remove the chimney or take it down to a level where the bricks were stable. We agreed with that. We were actually happy that the board contacted us to ask about that. Under state law, they're not actually required to do that, but we appreciate that working relationship. 403 South Washington Street, the petitioners there replaced and added some concrete pad in the back of the house that was well within the staff level approval, and the other was 163 East Main Street, which was the old gas company building. I think it's a court referral program now. They wanted to put a sign up. That sign has since been installed, and that was within your guidelines. So thank you.
Okay, thank you for taking care of that. Shortens our meetings here today. Okay, is there a motion to adjourn at this time?
So moved.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And we are adjourned. Thank you, guys.
And we'll so move.